Hi, friend. This is Alex McRobs, founder of the Mindful Life Practice, and you're listening to the Sober Yoga Girl podcast. I'm a Canadian who moved across the world to the Middle East at age 23, and I never went back. I got sober in 2019, and I now live full-time in Bali, Indonesia. I've made it my mission to help other women around the world stop drinking, start yoga, and change their lives through my online Sober Girls Yoga community. You're not alone, and a sober life can be fun and fulfilling. Let me show you how. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Sober Yoga Girl. I'm so excited to be sitting with Cole Chance today. And Cole has been kind of in my sphere for a while. Right when I moved to Bali, one of my friends actually mentioned Cole. And then someone else recently, I posted something on Facebook in a Facebook group about being sober, and someone commented being like, do you know Cole Chance? She has a great sober YouTube channel. And I was like, oh my God, this is so weird. This person keeps coming up in my life. And so I'm super excited to finally meet you after hearing your name and sort of having these mutual Bali connections, and to have the opportunity today to hear more about your story.
Beautiful. I'm excited to be here. Yeah, I'm glad that we synced up, and yeah, excited to share.
Yeah. So Cole is also a traveling yoga teacher. She was sharing with me right before the episode started. So she's in Colorado now, but she lives in Australia. And pre-COVID, she was traveling from lots of different places, including Bali and Guatemala. And I'm also a traveling yoga teacher. And so syncing up was a little bit difficult with all the time zone changes, but we finally made it work. And yeah. Cole, how long have you been sober for?
Just 9 years last month.
Wow, congratulations.
Yeah.
9 years. That's huge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really is. It feels impossible and just right. It's that paradox of it feels like I'm a completely different person, and I'm the absolutely same person. All of these different, these both and. But yeah, grateful for it. Absolutely.
So tell me more about your life pre-sobriety.
So I was, I was raised in Middle America. I was born in Oklahoma. Very Christian, conservative Middle America. And I was an only child, extrovert, introvert family. Only child, I mentioned. And around whenever I was 13, I had a pretty a chill childhood, played a lot of sports, was quite active. And then I remember all of a sudden feeling like there was a hierarchy. All of a sudden I began to notice that there were cool kids and not cool kids, and all of these different, this different kind of ladder. And I never noticed that before. And it may have been an average puberty, all the hormones that come along with all of that. In hindsight, I was beginning to have a social anxiety, but it's coming about this age, 13, 14, moving to middle school. And I didn't have a word for anxiety. I didn't know what that meant back then. I just knew I felt very uncomfortable. And I remember not being able to speak to the people I wanted to speak to, the cool kids, all of this, and this really inner turmoil that I'd never experienced before. So it was all of a sudden this new inner world. And I remember being at a friend's house whenever I was about 13 and drinking some peppermint schnapps in her pool on an inner tube. And I remember spinning around in the inner tube, looking up at the stars, and, the schnapps is running through my body. And I was feeling so incredible. And I said to myself, I put the hammer down to myself that this is what I want to do forever. This is it. All of those little pieces that were feeling really scattered of me, of I'm unsure, I don't know what to say, I don't know, all of these little pieces coalesced, and I felt more like me than I'd ever felt before. I was bigger than my body. and what's really interesting is it's a feeling of embodiment that I originally was receiving. That's that insidious trick. And like I said, I'd kind of like made an agreement to myself, like this was the golden key. I'd found the golden ticket and I'm going to do this forever. And that's really what I set out to do from there. So we began to just find like, older brothers or sisters, or, how you do to get alcohol here and there. But it just became, I started like thinking about it a lot. And this is kind of what I wanted, because it was that salve of who I wanted to be that allowed me to be who I wanted to be. But quite quickly, enters in something that really kind of set the trajectory for me, that I wouldn't have I was already pretty sure I was already on that path. I knew what I wanted, but I started dating an older boy, a cool older boy, of course. And the first time we had sex, I got pregnant when I was 14. So first time, last name's Chance. So the whole school finds out. Again, I'm in a very conservative part of the country. I have to go, my family finds out. I wind up going and having an abortion that my father has to take me to. And there's like protesters everywhere because we're in Oklahoma. And I mean, it was traumatizing. And I really don't remember that much about it. I remember like a few snapshots per how dissociation goes. And then they moved me schools. We actually moved states after that. And that was absorbed as they were embarrassed of me, that my parents were embarrassed of me. And I also remember like I couldn't speak to my parents about it. Like I couldn't process this. I like totally shut off. I decided that I hated my mother. I don't know how this all rationalized in my head, but I decided that I hated my mother and wouldn't really talk to my father. And I kind of set out with this new label that I had created for myself of like, I am bad. Like I'm the bad girl. Like this doesn't happen to anyone, like I am this thing. So we moved around in high school for a couple times, and I kept finding trouble wherever I went, because now it's kind of like, I felt so shameful on the inside. In hindsight, I felt so shameful that rather than saying like, I'm fucking hurting, I was like, I'm choosing this. Like, I'm doing this. Like, I'm bad. I'll show you I'm bad. Like, this is how that I had kind of turned it so that it felt, which we do all the time in a million different ways, of how we turn something painful into a story that feels like it's a choice. And then I proceeded, for the next 20 years to choose to really begin to kill myself, but feeling like it was a choice that I was making, that I was doing this, for fun, for all of this. And fun was a big piece of it, because that's what it was for a long time. I didn't realize I was kind of running from something as well. I had deluded myself into think that I was running to something, that I was seeking this feeling of that being bigger in my body. And I became this very, quite a colorful party girl. So this was then my new costume that was more comfortable for me to wear in the world. So I moved out of the house in high school. Then I'm finally on my own, because that feeling, many of us probably know that feeling of like, my parents are ruining my life. Like as soon as I can, get out and do this, then things will be good. And, I moved out, and in a stupor, I think I actually had crawled out of my parents' house. I had like eaten a bunch of ecstasy and was somehow ended up at my parents' house, and I couldn't get out. But I remember moving out like with my bags, like crawling out. It was quite something looking back. And then I tried to go to college, didn't work because I just, I partied the whole time. And then I have a long time of just repeating this cycle of very, very heavy partying, lots of cocaine, lots of ecstasy, quite young. So all of this started in high school. Lived in a town where there was Lake of the Ozarks in Missouri. If anybody knows this is a really big party town. and where people from the bigger cities would come and bring their yachts down from like Chicago and St. Louis. So I was hanging out with a lot of older men with a lot of money, with a lot of drugs. And I had like this a copious intake ability. And because I'm hanging out with these, again, these older people, I still have this hierarchy in my head of like, I'm needing to fit in. So I'm needing to prove myself in some way. So I would do more than anybody else. I would do like the biggest lines and the biggest, like all of this really, really odd pride in how much I could drink or how much cocaine I could do. Yeah, which became very, very painful. And quite quickly, whenever I was about 20, whenever I was having adverse effects for a long time, but whenever I was about 20, I was shaking in the morning, every morning. And that's whenever I began to realize that if I could just drink in the mornings, then all of a sudden I found like my second golden ticket, because I was like, why am I doing this? Why am I feeling depressed? Why am I shaking? Why are all these things happening to me? It can't be because I'm an alcoholic. It can't be because of this. Like my mind wouldn't even conjure that possibility. But I started having a little bit of vodka in my orange juice in the morning, and that fixed everything. A little side note is that I worked in a lot of tourist towns. So in the mountain towns in Colorado, in kind of summer towns. And I was bartending, cocktail waitressing, things like this. So everybody was drinking in the morning, and it was really easy to hide. It was really easy. Everyone was having mimosas. Everyone was having Bloody Marys. It wasn't that big of a deal. And it was once I moved out of this scenario a little bit, I could hide in that. I moved out of the scenario a little bit. I moved to Santa Cruz, which is also a big party town, but it wasn't a tourist town. So that it was a little bit odd that I was hiding vodka. So that was the first time that I was actually hiding it. Before, I wasn't really hiding it because we were all doing it. So that's one of those kind of pivotal moments, threshold moments, when it was like, this could go one of two ways. I could like dig into this issue that I'm having, or I can cover it up and start hiding it. So that's what I started doing, is began to hide it about that age. I start going to rehabs off and on in my 20s. And kind of what happens, without digging into all the stories of them, kind of what happens is that I hit a threshold. I go. I hit a threshold, and then I'm in a ton of pain, and I want help to stop hurting. And it gets to the point where I can't self-medicate. Like, that's not helping anymore. So I go to a threshold, and then something happens, something blows up, some proverbial, blow up. And then I'll say, okay, I'll go to rehab. But I never really wanted to get sober. I wanted to find a way to do it better, and I wanted to stop hurting. So quite quickly after I would detox, these things would start happening. I would start getting my head about me. I never started thinking about actually like getting sober. I was maneuvering. I was strategizing of how I wasn't going to drink in the mornings, or I wasn't going to, I'm going to have to like only do cocaine on the weekends, all of these different ways that we make deals with ourselves. And often I would like drink on the plane out of rehab. Like, it was very, very quick. This identity I like couldn't lose. So this would happen several times. I wind up having a grand mal seizure from alcohol withdrawal. So I say this just because of beginning to accumulate these adverse effects that really shouldn't be happening at this really young of an age. I think I was 24 when I had the grand mal seizure. My grandmother died. I flew home for the funeral. And I think that most of us probably all know how dangerous an alcohol withdrawal is to somebody who's highly flooded with booze, is that normally around day 2 or day 3, there's a possibility of a seizure. And that's what happened, because I'm trying to, and I was still drinking a little bit, but not very much, because I was with my family. And the night of my grandmother's funeral, I ended up in the hospital for a week with alcohol withdrawal. Not with alcohol withdrawal, with a seizure from alcohol withdrawal. And the doctor and everybody knew that I'm an alcoholic except me. And they're telling me like, this is this is from alcohol withdrawal. And I find, this is just how deluded, or how our delusion works. I find, like, on Google, that like 0.5% of people who have a grand mal seizure have it from stress. And I'm like, get off my back. My grandmother just died. Like, this is not from booze. And then I go back, I go right back out to Colorado, and I'm drinking on the plane, and, there it is. And they're like, we don't know when we'll see her again. But eventually family hears from me and I need help, or I need money, or something horrible has happened and they have to come and rescue me. I've been to a Scientology rehab on accident. I've actually been, it's funny because I travel all the time now, that I think I've been to 6 rehabs, and they've all been in different states. So I was like on a rehab tour in my 20s. But again, I wasn't trying to get sober. I was trying to feel better, and I wasn't willing to admit that I had an issue. So speeding all of this up a little bit, it gets so loopy in my head. Towards the end, I was living in Steamboat Springs, Colorado, and I was hitting this brink again. And often what I would try to do, I was in and out of detoxes often. I would go into detox because I need help, and then I would come out because I couldn't have booze. Like, this was this thing I was doing, or they wouldn't let me have a cigarette, or something like this would happen. And this would kind of happen quite regularly. So I know now that I have an issue, but I'm trying not to deal with it. So sometimes I would then try to get benzodiazepines, is what they would give me in the hospital to withdraw. So I decided I was going to do it at home. Don't recommend it. So then I would just really end up mixing Xanax and booze, saying that I'm taking this so I don't withdraw, but I have to drink now because otherwise I'll have a seizure. So this is a new excuse of mine, that if I don't drink, then I might have a seizure, which is a story I would tell myself and tell other people. So it was this balancing act, this constant balancing act of needing it, hiding it, making sure where to get it, making sure I have enough of it, drinking with you, but also drinking from the closet, having all the things I need, and managing this addiction while having fun. Remember, I'm having a good time this whole time. It winds up blowing up. I can't remember exactly what happened, but Xanax and booze, normally kind of get me to the wall, because it's really heavy blackouts. Like, I might be blacked out for a couple of days, and family comes and does a triage. They get me, I wake up in a rehab in Texas, in Austin, that they had picked out like a year prior, waiting for me again to say that I would go. So I go to this 3-month rehab, which, if anyone's going down the rehab route, it is way different than a 1-month rehab. And I did not want to be there. A friend of mine was the manager of the place at the time. She said I was like trying to throw a lion into a pool. Like, I was horrible the whole time. I was so angry about being there. But I remember hitting that 1-month mark, and being like, they tricked me. They said it was 1 month, and it was actually 3. So I was always saying I was leaving at 1 month. And luckily I had enough wits about me at 1 month that I realized that I was not okay. And that was more, I still didn't think I wanted to get sober, but I realized that my thinking was not okay, because it takes a long time for our brain to begin to heal. And luckily I stayed for the 3 months. Big difference. Still didn't get sober. I did have about 6 months outside of this treatment. I'm going to back up because I want to mention this yoga piece here. One of the rehabs that I went to about 5 years prior was in Santa Cruz. And this is the first time I ever did yoga. This is a very important moment. There was this, it's called the camp in Santa Cruz is where I was. And there was like this beautiful greenhouse in the redwoods, and that's where people did yoga. And I remember that my room wasn't ready or something. I was detoxing, actually. I wasn't supposed to be in there, but they let me go and lay down on a mat in this beautiful space. And it was gorgeous. And it was like as if there were cartoon birds chirping. And like, I just remember how beautiful it was and how angelic the teacher's voice was. And I reeked of that sweet, sticky smell of detox, of it coming out of my body. I hated myself. And I was just laying there shaking on this yoga mat. and everything around me was like so perfect. And I remember the teacher saying that she was a heroin addict. And I remember like looking at her, like I was trying to look for her addict and not believing her because she didn't look like it. She didn't sound like it. And I remember like not believing her. Anyway, I do yoga through this whole time. I wound up doing yoga through this whole time. And it really connected with me. And I didn't know why. And I remember a few things that I remember from it. I remember her letting us know what namaste meant. And I think I'd heard the word at the time, but I wasn't really sure. And the way that she said it was that my higher self sees your higher self, something like this. And I remember being like, I'm like, I don't have a higher self. Like thinking like there's a part of me that isn't this piece of shit. Like just that was like, huh. And I always had a really hard time with higher power. So this gave me some languaging to say, okay, maybe there's a part of me that is a little bit wise. Like maybe there's a part of me that isn't trying to kill me, that like wants me to do well. And again, that didn't happen right away, but it absorbed. So I remember leaving this treatment saying, someday when I quit drinking, but I'm not going to. Like I remember that thought, like the two different thoughts, like whenever you do, but I'm not, but maybe later. Then I'm going to look into this yoga thing. And then I proceeded to be wasted by the time that somebody picked me up in Tahoe on the other end. But I started going to yoga every now and again. And towards the end, you could ask me like, how are you doing? Or you could say like, when's the last time you've been to yoga? Because they would be really correlated. So I started kind of living this double life. Like I was kind of at the yoga studio sometimes, and I would like overhear people's conversations because I didn't know who these people were, what they were doing. Like I'd like didn't know this type of living. So I'm like listening to like what people are eating, or like, do you want to go on a tea date? And I'm like, I've never fucking been on a tea date. Like we could like get martinis at lunch. So just all of this stuff I'm overhearing, and I'm like, okay, I'm like buying the yoga pants, and like I'm kind of like modeling in this way of what even this language is. But eventually, here we go, getting a little bit more comfortable there. So out of this last treatment in Austin, I have about 6 months sober, and this is the longest that I'd ever had sober. I was living at a sober living place there in Austin. Didn't want to be sober, but I had to at the moment. Like I just had to because a zillion different reasons. And I wind up relapsing for the last time. I was a massage therapist. At some point I went to massage therapy school, luckily, and I was a massage therapist. And this guy, one of my clients, we go to this French, fancy French restaurant. And the waiter asked me, would you like a Chardonnay or a Sauvignon Blanc? It was at lunch, lunch date, safe. This is what he asked me if I wanted to drink. And I was like, Sauvignon Blanc. And he brought that to my table. And I have this uncanny ability to shut off the part of my brain that's telling me not to do something. So I just told it to fuck off. And they brought it, and I took a drink. And this has been about 6 months now. And every cell in my body woke up all the way down to my toes. I had butterflies all the way down to my toes. And my body was like, fuck yes. My head was like, oh no. And I went home, and I did not drink anymore that day. I laid on the couch and I thought about it like this for the rest of the day. And in the morning, I was at the liquor store right when they opened, and then it was on. The difference about going to a town where you went to treatment, for me anyway, is I went to a town, I went for rehab. I didn't know anyone otherwise. I only knew the recovery community there. So when I relapsed, I immediately called the people who I knew who already had relapsed. And they're waiting, like, come on. It's really interesting because we co-sign on each other's, we want to feel like whatever we're doing is okay. So when we have people around us that are also doing it, it makes it feel okay. So I called my friends in rehab that had relapsed recently. They, of course, came and picked me up right away. And we went on a bit of a rampage for the next 6 months or something. This last 6 months was really intense. Again, this wasn't partying here. This was addiction. I mean, all of it was addiction, but this didn't have the illusion of the party anymore. There's so much guilt and shame now. I can't drink like knowing that I am not an alcoholic. That was gone really a long time ago. So there's so much guilt and shame that come along with it now, and hiding. So I was, and now I'm also with people who are deep in their addiction as well. So condensing this, it gets really hectic. It gets really heavy. And I'm trying to stop drinking, and I can't. Me and a friend come up with a great idea. So the great idea was because I used to, I don't drink on opiates because they make me nauseous whenever I drink, and I have opiates, and they just make me sleepy. Like opiates were never my thing, but like Oxycontin and stuff like that. But I'm with people like in their addiction. So I'm with a bunch of people doing all kinds of things. So me and my friend come up with the idea that I'll do some heroin so that I don't want to drink. So this was our grand idea. So we go, and then I begin shooting heroin. And we also then decide that we're mix it with cocaine. So then all of a sudden we're like in this whole other thing. It was heavy. It was heavy, and it was there wasn't anything pretty about it. There wasn't anything luxurious about it. Whenever I started, I think I mentioned I was in these big party towns on these yachts, and we were smoking cocaine. We wouldn't call it crack. We would be smoking cocaine. And it's very, I had this picture of myself always being like, like, this is my nostalgia of what my addiction was like carefree, fancy free, so fun. And in the end, I'm like at a crack house on the bad side on the tough side of Austin with prostitutes around, children, trailer houses, smoking crack, shooting heroin. It was intense. I recall laying on a bed, and everybody was waiting for some dude to come back with whatever it is that we were waiting for. And this house was just nasty. And I remember laying there, and there was a mirror on the ceiling, and I was laying next to a girl. I didn't know who she was, but I was looking up at us laying on the bed in the ceiling. She couldn't have been 16. She's probably 16. And I was like, oh my God. And remembering that, me at this age, at her age, and it was just like such a sucker punch. This didn't last very long, thankfully. I went into detox. I had to go into detox a few times, and I would check myself out once with a patient. It was hectic, and it was almost like I was trying to make this story of like I would always do the thing that you shouldn't do, or the thing that was like the most absurd. Like that's the thing I would do. It's almost like I saw myself like living in a movie. And in the end, just to kind of cut out some of this, in the end, I overdosed, and I was left there because that's what people do. They don't want to get in trouble. And what I remember is I was standing up, and then all of a sudden I was like, I was trying to talk. I was trying to say something isn't right. Something isn't right. And my voice was coming out like, and I just crumpled to the ground. And then I woke up, I don't know how long later, but no one was there. And I had to get across town to this room that I had rented. And I remember I had to like walk out to the highway in Austin in the middle of August, I-35. And I needed to get across the street to the bus station. And my brain had been electrocuted. Like I'd never felt anything like this before. And I had to look across the street, but I couldn't turn my head. So I had to like turn my whole body like very slowly several times to figure out if I could like get across the street. And I finally made it across the street. And I made it back to this little room that I had rented across from our liquor store. And I bought a bunch of booze, and I think I had some pills, and I was going to do the only thing that I knew how to do, which was to self-medicate. I knew it was going to be a while. And I was taking and drinking, and nothing was happening. And I'd been in and out of treatments now, and in and out of AA and all of these things. So I have all of these, words and phrases and stuff in my mind. And one thing that came to mind was, I don't know if you've ever heard the phrase that someday it's just not going to work anymore. And they say that in AA. And I actually think what they mean is like that one day what you're doing is not going to work anymore. But what I took it to mean, thankfully, is that one day, like the booze isn't going to work anymore. That's what I always thought they meant. Like one day, and they did mean that, but not in that way. Mm-hmm. They meant like, it's not going to work for your life, but I took it like, it's not going to actually work. Like I'm going to drink it and it's not going to do anything. But that's what happened that day. And it's because I wasn't nursing a hangover. Like this was something different. So I was taking the pills, I was drinking the booze, nothing was happening. And I was terrified. Because if you know, then your thing, if it's not working, if that one thing of relief that doesn't work, you got nothing left. And then I recalled something else that somebody had told me once in treatment. I was asking somebody who worked there, I was like, how did you do it? Like, seriously, how did you do it? I'm flabbergasted. Didn't want it, didn't know how to do it. But I remember asking this girl, and what she told me was, one day you're going to realize that you can be high or you can be happy, but that they're never going to go together again. So yeah, your drinking and your things was great, but one day, they're never going to mesh. And that's what I remembered. And I was like, I'm fucked. I quit. Because that's the only thing I knew. I didn't want to die. I never wanted to die. I'd been told that this is what was going to happen to me soon for years now. But that's not what I wanted. I wasn't after that. And some people are. Some people are after different intentions. And my intention was to live a big life and to be a big in my life. And it fucking tricked me. And I called a sober living place that I had been kicked out of only a month prior because I'd been hiding booze around that sober living house and forgot where I would hide them. They had no reason to let me back in. And they did. There's many reasons why they shouldn't have let me back in. Normally, they only take people from treatment. There's all of these reasons. I didn't have any money. They let me in for free. They had one bed in all of Austin. Actually, there's one bed in sober living that's available for somebody with a financial aid. And they gave that bed to me, and they shouldn't have. I'm grateful that they did. But I called them and they said to come on a Wednesday. First of all, no one had ever heard me ask for help because I was always in the wrong place at the wrong time. I wasn't supposed to be in rehab. I wasn't supposed to be in detox. I wasn't supposed to be in sober living. But this is the first time that I asked. And she said, come on a Wednesday. And I showed up on a Tuesday night with my bag. And I said, I will sleep on your couch. And that was it. And when I walked into that place, I don't think I could have done it without that place. If anybody has questions around sober living, happy to talk about that. I've been in many. But when it's good, when you need it, I don't know if there was another way I could have done it. To have that sense of safety there where I didn't have it anywhere else. Right outside that door, I was on my own. I was making my own choices. I needed that little bit of accountability. And I went to Wanderlust in Austin. They had 30 days for $30, and that's probably all the money I had. I probably borrowed it. I'm sure I didn't have that money. And I started going every day. And again, I told you that I had been in and out of yoga this whole time. And every time I would get to my mat, it would be like I had touched home base. I'd be like, whew, it was a sign of okay, I have this little sense of safety. And it had been a long time since I've been back because this last 6 months had been real hectic, thankfully. But I made it back, and I was in this class of 50 people in the back of the room, and I made it to my mat and I got in child's pose, and I just ugly cried in the back of the room. And I was scared, and I was hopeful, like a little bit of hope, mainly just terrified. And I just kept fucking coming back. I just kept coming back every day. I wind up doing my teacher training there later that year. One of the first places where I openly admitted that I was an alcoholic was in my teacher training. And I just kept going. I just kept doing it. I eventually, about a year out, I started teaching in treatment centers. I started volunteering at one of the treatment centers that I had been to as a student, that I went and started teaching at. And I remember the first time that I walked out of there, like, the dream of anybody in rehab is to get out of rehab. I always was trying to like figure out how I was going to get out of rehab. And then I walked in and taught a yoga class, and I walked out the front door, and I just like cried at the front door. And I was like, oh my God, I just walked in and out of rehab. Like, crazy. So that is that side of the story. And just pause there.
It's honestly so incredible and inspiring, like how much you've overcome and how much you've been through, and just the challenges you faced, and the place you are now in your life. Like, I'm just, I'm amazed. I really am.
Me too. Yeah, me too. Like I mentioned earlier, it is really crazy to like, sometimes I feel like I'm telling a story about another person. And then sometimes, I just have to close my eyes for like a half a second and be like right there. So we like take ourselves with us, and we change so much, but it's both. I think that's a big piece of it, of like this wholeness, this whole healing game, is that we aren't like, I didn't cut that piece off of me. Like, we can't do that. We can't like selectively numb, selectively sever ourselves, but taking that part of me with me. So it's really important to remember that's still here, that we change, but yeah, we're with ourselves.
So tell me about, sorry, what were you going to say?
Oh, I just said it's been a trip.
So tell me about how you went from, okay, so you did your teacher training, and then you were volunteering in rehabs, and at what point did you start to travel internationally and start to run yoga retreats? Like, where did that part of your yoga career build?
So funnily enough, I started teaching in rehabs. I started teaching at like, public libraries, like all of these little things that you do whenever you're first, your first teaching. And I was just getting out of sober living. I had bartended for a really long time. And of course, I can't do that. So I'm looking for money. So I was looking at Craigslist, and I found a Craigslist ad for a yoga YouTube channel. This is like really, not many people are doing this. And I'm like, whatever. So I meet this guy, and Yoga TX was the channel, and they were just kind of starting out. And I started filming with him. Really didn't, I'm really a new teacher, but for whatever reason, we start doing this, and I didn't think anyone would ever watch it. I just thought that I would have like some video resumes was my plan, that I could like send around to some studios, because my whole life, all I've wanted to do is travel. My whole life, little girl from Oklahoma, I just wanted to travel. So I'm thinking that I can, send this resume places and get jobs in different resorts and stuff. But people started watching, and it was really bizarre. And I was really never nervous in front of the camera because I didn't think anyone was going to watch. So like that was really helpful. And people started watching. And like that first video that I did, I think it's so funny to watch back. It's so cringy to watch it, but has like 5 million views or something on it. Like, I don't know.
Wow.
It just something with the algorithm. But that channel really grew.
Yeah.
So that really supported people watching my classes. And so that thing is going on. So some people people would reach out every now and again about, could you come and teach here? Where will you be, or something like that. But then also on the other end of that, I'd mentioned that I was a massage therapist. So in and out of my, my addiction, I was I was holding down jobs, either bartending or doing some massage. And I did a lot of Thai massage. So I was working at a spa in Austin, and I'd been connected with this other girl who was doing Thai massage, and she, a friend of a friend, she needed an assistant to do a retreat in Thailand. And my friend was like, I know someone here, meet Cole. And it's my friend Jen Hillman, who she teaches has a YouTube channel as well. But she took me to Thailand. We went to Thailand and to Bali.
Wow.
It was like a 6-week Thai massage training. And I had never been over there. Thank goodness I didn't get out of the country in my addiction, because I would not have made it back. So we go to Thailand and we go to Bali, and I am like, oh my God, like I am so excited. My whole family, everyone is terrified, like that I am, this is the perfect time for me to relapse. And I'm like, I don't even care. Like I didn't even want it. Like, this is what I wanted. And I remember when I went to Bali, especially, just blew me away. Like all these people in Ubud, I'm like, what are they on? Like, and I'm there for 3 months, and like nobody once offered me a drink. I didn't have to like avoid drinking. I didn't have to like say I don't drink. I didn't have the dreaded words I don't drink, which is so strange, but it's true in the beginning. Getting to see people living in a completely different way. I was hooked. I was absolutely hooked. So then I go with her the next year, and I begin to see, I'm seeing the inner workings of retreat. So I'm seeing it from the back end, how this is all being set up. And I'm like, I can do this. So it kind of began with that. And I've done a ton of retreats now. So that was probably like eight years ago. So it started quite quickly afterwards. Yeah.
It sounds like it's kind of like as soon as you started to step into your purpose, everything just fell into place because it was exactly what you were meant to be doing.
It was eerie in a good way, but it happened very quickly. I started traveling a lot very, very quickly, like around the world journeys within like the second year. I was also doing yoga and massage on like this giant sail ship. Like all of these things just started like happening, and I was there for it. And in a sense, I always wanted this big life. Like I always wanted this, like I've always wanted something. This was filling like that for me, of like realizing that I could have this, like I could be big in the world and like experience culture and experience people and the different ways that people are living and cultures and smells, or I could have the bottle. Like that was like a fake big, like it wasn't real. And I didn't know that this was possible. And you just like, you don't know what you don't know. And it was just a slow opening. But when it opened, I would have sold myself short if somebody would have asked me, like, what do you want? If you could do anything, you could get sober and you could have anything you wanted, what would you want? Like, I would have sold myself short. I would have gave myself a bad deal compared to what I have now.
Wow. It's just so incredible to think about your journey, the journey that you've been on and what you're doing today. It's amazing. And so what do you have coming up soon in terms of like, do you have any big yoga retreats or things coming up in the next little while?
Yeah, I have coming back to Bali soon, which I'm really excited about, but first in Australia. So I moved to Australia. I'm going to host my first retreat there in beginning of February on the 1st through the 5th. And then I come to Bali the 13th through the 20th. So I'm so excited to be back there. Ubud that's my spot. Will you be there then?
I think I will be. Yeah.
Cool.
We'll have to meet up.
Yeah. And then I'm running Emerge, which I have a 8-week online sobriety self-inquiry program. It's really beautiful. It's called Emerge, that I created a couple of years ago. And I run that beginning in March. So that runs for 2 months. And then I also have teacher trainings, 300-hour, 200-hour later in the year in Portugal in June. So I'm a bit manic. I'm all over the place. Yeah. So I love it.
That's
I love getting
incredible.
to share this practice, little pieces of what has supported me, and get to share it with others and see how it comes alive in them. Like, what a gift. So,
And I'm wondering, if you had any advice or wisdom for maybe your younger self before you went alcohol free, before you got sober, what would your advice be?
mm, my younger self didn't take any advice, but I think what I would really want her to know, something to the sort of that, you don't know, like leave space in your knowing, like leave room for possibility. I was living very small. I had a very small frame of the world and what I believed to be true. So I wouldn't have believed it, but I would, if I could infuse something, it's a different question. If I could infuse something into my younger self, it would be to remember that there is something else that you don't know yet. Because I think that we do it just as humans, that we like to create a sense of story and a sense of ground. And so we make shit up to feel like we know something. But as soon as we think that we know, it takes away the possibility. And yeah, I think that's really important to leave space for something that we don't know. Just counterintuitive, but very important.
Love that. It reminds me of one of the themes from my teacher, was letting go in order to receive, and that idea of letting go and receiving what you receive from letting go. You often don't know what you're going to receive, but it can be beautiful if you open your mind for it.
Yeah. Leaving space, leaving room. I should remind myself that all the time. Yeah.
Cole, I want to thank you so much for being on the show today and sharing your story and your journey with the community. It's just been so inspiring to sit down with you and hear from where you came from to where you are now. And in the show notes and everything, I'll put in the links to your website and your information, as I'm sure lots of people listening will want to connect. You too. Take care.
Ciao.
Hi, friend. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Sober Yoga Girl podcast. This community wouldn't exist without you here, so thank you. It would be massively helpful if you could subscribe, leave a review, and share this podcast so it can reach more people. If we haven't met yet in real life, please come get your 1-week free trial of the Sober Girls Yoga membership and see what we're all about. Sending you love and light wherever you are in the world.